So for our next speaker, we have a surgeon who will speak positively as surgeons do. His name is Dr. Robert Sewell. I have the privilege of knowing him for many years and participating in AAPS activities with him as well to restore patient care for patients and to free physicians to do it. Dr. Sewell practices general surgery in Southlake, Texas, and you'll know if you follow him on Twitter, I believe Southlake is part of his Twitter handle. He's a past president of the American Society of General Surgeons and governor of the American College of Surgeons. He's an outspoken advocate for the independent practice of medicine and an author of the novel series A Surgeon's Heart, which we discussed on my radio show some months ago, which is available in podcast at wgls.rowan.edu if anyone has interest. And Dr. Sewell is going to speak with us about building a coalition around our patients. Thank you, Dr. Sewell.
Thank you, Dr. Wax. I have to admit that after following Parth and Dr. Zwelling, I'm a little intimidated. I'm that guy that had to have my kid come and show me how to check my email. So technologically speaking, maybe a little intimidating. But I do think that when I was asked by Judith Thompson, if I wanted to come and participate, I said, yeah, sure. She said, well, what do you want to talk about? And I'm not really sure that I knew at that time, but I feel like that where we are and much of our conversations around the last few hours and just since I've been here are all about the patient. What can we do for the patient? And it was brought up in the last talk how little our patients really understand about what we're going through. So my suggestion was, well, let's talk about building a coalition. What I mean by a coalition, why do we even need a coalition? Well, this is me. I have a little more hair than my little character here on the screen, but not much. And the problem is, as Andy Shafley, the chief counsel for AAPS, said a couple of years ago, there's a war on doctors. And that war puts the target right directly on us. I would also contend that there's also a war on patients too, and we're kind of one and the same. And unfortunately, we're both losing that war. And so the question is, well, what are we going to do about it? We're just going to stand there and take the shots, or are we going to do something proactive? Now, this is a group of doctors together. How many times have you ever seen a group of doctors all get together and agree on anything? Almost never. But maybe the time is now that we can begin to build this coalition within our own ranks. We're fighting against a group of faceless immortals. This is from the movie 300, and all those people looked alike. Unfortunately, we don't really know who all's behind the various different masks. We just know that they are out to get us. What we need is a group of warriors. Doctors are not very good warriors typically, but perhaps in this organization, or I should say in this room, we've got a few of the 300 types. What we also need, though, are allies to join our ranks, and those allies are our patients. And I would contend that part of the reason why we are at war, why the patients are at war, is that basically we are economically dependent. And I showed this slide, I actually had this cartoon drawn up for me in 2009, before Obamacare was passed. But essentially it was to demonstrate the angst in the faces of the patient and the doctor. That's one of them says Joe the patient, and the other one just has MD on his lapel. They're both shooting up. They're addicted to third-party payments. The third-party payer broker, if you will, the pusher, has got these syringes in every pocket, and he's standing there counting his money. He's got a big smile on his face. They're happy as they can be with this system, and the government comes along, taps him on the shoulder, and says, I'll take over from here, because they want the power. Nancy Reagan made famous once by talking about drug addiction, and says, what do we do about drug addiction? She said, just say no. When are we going to stand up and pull the needle out of our arm and say no? In my introduction, Craig did not say that I've been insurance-free as a general surgeon for 13 years. That doesn't mean that I don't help patients with insurance. It means I'm out of network. And I've also, in the last 3 years, gotten free of Medicare, which was a difficult challenge for me. Now that I'm going to be on Medicare very soon, incidentally, I don't have much choice about that. That's a whole another question. Anyway, this is the physician's perspective. The average practicing physician sees their patients across the divide from them, separated by the insurance company or the government and the money. Okay, the money that is controlled by those two entities keep us from being directly involved with our patients. So what are our options? Well, we can rely on our allies being the hospital where we work, or a group of similarly organized people. At least we think those ought to be our allies. Or how about the American Medical Association? They've been the ally for physicians for a long time. At least this is what we thought. Unfortunately, the money has kind of drifted into those coffers as well. As was mentioned earlier, the American Medical Association makes a large part of its budget through contractual arrangements where they do the ICD-9 and ICD-10 and the CPT coding and all that we have to abide by. And I've been there. I've sat through the meetings, and it's amazing to me how the American Medical Association has 2 meetings a year of the Congress or the House of Delegates. And the vast majority of the discussion is not about medicine. It's about payments. It's about insurance. It's about government. And instead of being about our profession and our ethics and our values. So likewise, your hospital, if you think your hospital is in your camp, you have another thought coming. The fact is the hospital follows the money, and many of our organizations follow the government. So, what are options? One option is to become an employed physician. I might point out to you that the employed physician will get some reimbursement from the hospital, some payment. I hate that word reimbursement because we don't get reimbursed for what we do. We get paid for what we do. Reimbursement is if you came to this meeting as a delegate from whomever and you paid your own resources to do that, then you ask for them to reimburse you because you're out cash. We're not getting reimbursed. We're being paid for our services. At any rate, the hospital now is still in between you and your patient. And that's really a problem. You end up having to take your marching orders from wherever that sack of money happens to have come from. So as an independent physician, the perspective is a little different. You get rid of all of those other entities and you try and work your relationship with the patient directly. Again, there's that sack of money. It's kind of between us. We have to decide how we're going to work that out. But this is what the patient's perspective typically is. And that is that you're not actually in their camp. You're over in the other camp. You're part of the system. Doctors and hospitals and government and big pharma. And I wish I had known ahead of time that I was going to be following the last talk, and I would have included healthcare IT companies, because it sounds like that they're likewise in that same business. And of course, the perception is that the amount of money that's involved is so huge that there's no chance that the poor patient can possibly participate in any way in this. That's why they rely on third-party payment as well. They're just as addicted as we are. So we need to change that perspective. And how we change that perspective is by providing our patients with true value. Marcy talked about this in her practice, how important it is that we be transparent with our approach to our patients. But I think it goes really beyond that. And that's becoming a leader in the eyes of our patients. They need to see us as standing up for them, enlarging their position as well as our own in this whole argument. I think the way to do that is through better communications. And our communications need to be, while it's great to get together and talk among ourselves and kind of develop these strategies and so forth, ultimately it's communicating with our patients, because they don't really know what's going on, and they're extremely fearful of it. They're expecting us to talk to them about health care. But when I was a resident, and even before, back when I was in medical school in the 70s, there were some things that we were told you don't talk about. You don't talk about religion to your patients. You do not talk about money to your patients, and you do not talk about politics. Those are forbidden. As you know, doctors are supposed to rise above that position. We're supposed to be only talking to the patient about the disease entity and what we can do to help them. But I'm going to suggest to you that it's pretty difficult to be a physician and not have some moral values, some faith-based philosophy, and your patients do as well. You don't have to become evangelical about it, but to deny the existence makes you somewhat less effective and makes you somewhat of a non-factor. I have a little sign in my waiting room sitting on one of the deals with the plants. And it says, it's 2 Chronicles 7:14. It just says, prayer is the answer. And it's amazing the number of people who come into my office and they say, I loved your sign out front. And they open the door. They talk about their own fears and their own wishes and their own belief systems. If you don't talk about money to them, then they perceive that that's not important. And while I'm not suggesting it becomes the number one topic, and I agree with what Marcy said. When you answer the phone, you don't say, what kind of insurance do you have? That's the classic situation now. You ask them, how can I help you? But ultimately, they want to know, what is this going to cost? And so you have to be willing to talk about that as well. And Lord knows, politics has become all about health care. And if we sit on the sideline and we don't talk about politics and we don't make people understand who it is that we find acceptable and who it is that we find unacceptable personally. I'm not talking about, as a group we have to have this one political statement, but your individual patients will respect you of it. In fact, most of the time they're wanting to know, what do you think about this? What do you think about that within the political arena? You need to be willing to express yourself. So what I'm talking about really is more than just communications. It's an engaging process with the patients. Understand they're frightened. The public does not like what's happening to this healthcare system, and they are fearful that it's going to result in rationing or some other form of problems that are going to interfere their relationship with you. They also implicitly trust their physician. If they didn't, they would not be in your waiting room. They wouldn't be in your office. They have to trust you. And as Marcy said, not to take advantage of that, but to recognize that there's an opportunity there for you to help them and provide them information, and that they are going to likely trust that far better than they would information that they're getting off of the pundits that want to talk about this on television. The other aspect of it is I think you need to sit down and spend a little bit of time in advance and decide what you want to say. You personally, not take the bullet points from anybody's talk or any organization, but what is your communication plan? How do you anticipate talking to patients? And then once you develop that plan, create a multitude of tactics that you can use. Now, when I say tactics, in medicine, we tend to want to do everything in the scientific method. Well, we'll get to that in just a moment. But to start with, you got to understand what patients believe, where they're coming from to begin with. Create your message, but know that they think you're wealthy. You may be, especially compared to the average patient. You probably have more resources than they do, but that's a barrier to start with. You need to kind of make sure that you accept that, recognize it. Don't try and tell them your hardships or whatever. They think that whatever's wrong with them is far more important than whatever your situation might be. They also have sometimes a difficult time understanding that whether you can relate to them. So knowing what their problems are, if you can just tell them a brief little synopsis of, I understand, I had a family member with that same problem myself, or what, recognizing that creating that relationship is critically important, because unless you can come across as being their advocate, as opposed to simply trying to get them to agree with you in your position, you're not going to be real successful in your communications. Point out, don't hesitate, point out what third parties are doing, why they are doing it. Much of what you've heard talking about in the last talk, where the companies, they're just in it for the money, and rightfully so. That's their business ethic. But our ethic as practitioners, as physicians, should be that we are that Hippocratic advocate for the patient, and the patient needs to understand that that's our reason for being. Then there's the need to focus on the patient-physician relationship. This is the key to practicing medicine, and it has been since Hippocrates' time. And that is being destroyed by all of these third parties who want to use that relationship for their own benefit. And they want to do it because they can't always control the patient, but they can sure try and control the physician. The patients will oftentimes come in and ask questions about, what do I think about the latest news out of Washington or whatever. You need to be aware of what's happening and initiate the discussions if necessary based on your own understanding of the current news issues. And then finally, no whining. I mean, this is what we're really good at, especially getting the doctor's lounge. Everybody just whines and complains all the time. Oh, so-and-so, ICD-9 and 10, whatever. Doesn't make any difference. We whine and complain. If you carry that forward into your discussion with your patients, you'll lose them immediately. They'll all become about you as opposed to about them. So I want to go back up to the previous slide and say, making a patient-centered message, it's all about the patient. I do this. I put printed materials in my waiting room. First of all, the waiting room is very small. I don't have a lot of patients waiting. I don't let them wait very long. I call it the reception area, but there's things out there that they can pick up. They may be articles that I've written. They may be something that I printed off the internet, or they may be something that some other organization has provided. But it will oftentimes stimulate the discussion that will then subsequently happen within the examination room. These direct face-to-face discussions are an important part of developing that coalition with the patient. I write a blog. My blog is called spiritofhealthcare.com. I kind of backed off a little bit in the last few years for another reason I'll mention in a minute. But let people know what you think. If you don't have much of an interest in writing yourself, point people to someone else's blog that you feel like represents your views fairly well, and post it on your website. And if you don't have a website, you need a website. Okay, you need a website for your practice, and you don't need to not be hesitating to post things that are important to you. I think speaking to organizations like the local Lions Club or the local Rotary or one of those organizations, they're all the time looking for people to speak. If you just let someone know, hey, I'd like to give a little talk about it, you'd be amazed at how quickly they'll jump on that, because everybody in their group is concerned about healthcare issues, and they're usually not all that accurate in their understanding of what's going on. I also recommend writing a letter to the editor of your local newspaper. Especially during times of when things are in the media. Discussions about healthcare are in the media all the time, but at certain times, like the recent Supreme Court decisions, those are your opportunities. Call into the talk radio programs and let them know who you are. Let them understand that you're providing this as an individual. You're not representing some organization or whatever, but that as a practicing physician, these are the concerns that you have. There's a lot of people listening to talk radio. I also would recommend, too, that if you're really wanting to get involved, call the local newspaper or television stations, talk to a reporter down there, and just offer, hey, when you have something come up, here's my contact information, call me. I was recently contacted, just kind of cold, right after the latest Supreme Court decision by a local producer, and said, we're going to do our program about that tonight. Would you come on? Yeah, absolutely. So the opportunities are there when you volunteer your options. But as was mentioned a minute ago about technology, I think this is probably the most important part, and that is social media. Social media is, there's a lot of different varieties. These are the two that I participate in mostly, and they're certainly the most, the largest volume of patients, or large volume of public participation. And it's where your patients are, and they're there every day. They're constantly looking for information about this, that, or the other. Facebook does not have to be just about posting, what you had for dinner last night. It can be, an article that you've written or that you find is particularly helpful. And Twitter is really kind of cool because it makes you be brief with your comments. You only got 140 characters, so you have to get a little witty. You have to, and the use of hashtags is extremely important. People don't read stuff unless it's hashtagged and they're following a specific hashtag. As I said, post your comments regularly. I don't necessarily mean every day, but often enough that you're seen as being there. And I think that providing links to appropriate articles is a real quick, easy way to do it. I have a number of you all in this room here that I follow on Twitter and are friends with on Facebook, and it's not uncommon that the way we communicate is by, hey, did you see this article? Well, our patients are seeing that too, and they see that those are the things that are important to us. And then also linking together with other physicians, especially like-minded folks. So if you're not already on Twitter and Facebook, I would recommend that you do so. And the quickest way to get some followers is to follow other physicians. This several years ago at a meeting of Docs for Patient Care, I introduced, along with a couple of other people, introduced Chris Held to Twitter. She had never been on Twitter. She now has like 3,500 more than that, over 10,000 followers on Twitter, and she's also on Facebook. And if you want to follow one person who's got something almost every day, sometimes 5 and 6 posts a day, just go follow KKS Held on Twitter or Chris Held on Facebook, and you'll find that a lot of good information flows through there. You don't have to retweet everything or re-forward, reshare every message that she gives, but it's important that you see that here's a source of information that you don't have to go out and search for yourself. Somebody is already doing that kind of for you. And incidentally, I asked her if it was all right if I used her image, and she said okay. She spoke to this group, I believe, yesterday. Now, effective communications are based on one of two possible routes. One is what we call the fact, reason, and logic account. This is something that doctors are really good at. We're good at hey, these are the facts, and you need to understand logically this is what's going on. There's another type of communication, and that is called the bleeding heart, and this is the one that has anecdotes, hyperboles, and emotion involved. Typically, if you look at this from a political standpoint, this is what conservatives do. They try and argue based on facts and logic, and the liberals tend to argue based on emotion. Well, I'm going to suggest to you that both types of communication tools are extremely helpful in this in this organization, in this process of trying to initiate a coalition with the patients. So use both. Know your facts, know your logical arguments, etc., but also be able to tell a story using a certain amount of emotion. And that's the reason why I chose back in March of 2013 to begin writing a series of novels. These are healthcare related novels, but they're largely for the public. And so they are emotion driven. And it's not a matter of trying to tell people what they should think or how they should believe about healthcare. It's more telling them a story and getting them emotionally involved. That's why I chose as my main character a pediatric heart surgeon. I'm not a pediatric heart surgeon, so it's not my story. But the idea was to engage people emotionally, and that's a topic that's pretty hard not to be emotionally charged by. So if you're interested, my books are available online as well, both in electronic format as well as paperback, Amazon, and all that sort of stuff. In fact, I'll have some here later in the conference. If anyone's interested, I'll be happy to make them available. Surgeonsheart.com is the website. Enough of that self-promotion. Sorry, I know that it may be a little bit beyond the scope of a talk to give a discussion about your own work, but I was told once by a marketing person is that if you don't promote yourself, no one else will. So the end of that process. So I'm going to suggest to you, part of the reason why you guys are here, everyone who's at this meeting, probably everyone who's listening on the internet, is already concerned about our profession. We have organizations called Take Back the Profession and so forth. I'm going to suggest to you that all those hours that you spend in medical school and residency and up half the night and everything that you've been doing since then, this is your profession. It's time to take a stand. It's time to not continue to do things the way we've been doing and expect somebody else to fix it for us. And we need to make it about our patients. We shouldn't be afraid to talk to our patients about what our own fears are. But most importantly, getting involved, leading by example. And what I mean by that is becoming the go-to person in your community on healthcare issues. Become the expert. Everyone's looking for someone who they can rely on to provide information from a physician's perspective. You need to lead those patients because they need you. You also need to lead your colleagues because they're seeking leadership. They're just as upset as you are about the fact that our organizations haven't always been there to lead the way for us. And then offer solutions. And this is something that has been mentioned several times before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, but individual solutions, free enterprise. And the idea of offering a service for a fee is not unacceptable in America. At least it hasn't been up to now, and they're trying to move us in that direction. But I say let's let the left lane end and move our process in the other direction. When we get into private individual care, you have to be willing to look at providing the best possible service. You also want to make sure that your pricing is transparent, as Marcy was talking about, posted on your internet website. All of that equals value. Value to whom? Value to the patient. That's who you serve, not value to some faceless third party. The broader political solutions would include things like the health savings accounts. And I think that's a very valuable approach. I'm not going to repeat everything Marcy said, but I think it's right to start with a health savings account at birth. This is something that Ben Carson has been talking about as part of his political campaign, and I think he's exactly right. And you can marry that or combine it with a catastrophic insurance plan that will cover those things that are totally unforeseen. So, in summary, I'm going to suggest that we have us and the patients. And this is where we need to be trying to build this coalition, build this relationship. But what we have as part of the network here are the hospital, the government, and those countless other faceless enemies of private practice. they're using the one weapon that they have, and that is money. They're trying their best to control us and the patients through that. And I'm going to suggest that what they're trying really to do is to drive a wedge between us. They want us separated from the patient, and that's what we have to work to avoid. We can't really rely on the hospital to be our advocate. They've obviously not been there for us up to now, and I don't believe that we can rely on most of our major medical organizations, because by and large they have not seen fit up to this point to stand up for primary care or stand up for independent practitioners. So we need to move the money process back between us. It's between us and the patients. You notice the money got smaller too. But when the money got smaller, so did the government and the insurance industry and all of those enemies. My final challenge to you is to create a coalition and have that coalition be created around your patients. You need to be standing with the patients. And you also need to be standing with your colleagues. The colleagues are looking for someone to help build this coalition as well. And finally, they need a leader. That leader needs to be you. So, and finally, I'll ask you to remember one last statement, and that is, leaders don't whine. Okay? And thank you for your attention, and I'm just right on time. It worked out much better than I expected.
Well, thank you. If you want to have a seat,
sure.
We'd love to entertain some questions here or from the internet. Thank you for a great presentation about building a coalition around your patients, basically the only entity that matters. I've said many times before that the government can't judge me, insurance companies can't judge me, my professional associations can't judge me. There's only one entity on the planet that can judge me, and it's not my wife. It is the patient. It is the patient. That is the one entity who judges what you're worth and whether they're going to continue that relationship. That's so. Thank you. I appreciate your time. And anybody that wants to follow, it's Dr. Bob Southlake on Twitter.
Dr. Bob _Southlake is my Twitter handle, and obviously I'm on Facebook just as Robert Sewell. But I agree with what you've just said. The patient is the final arbiter. But in that one slide that I showed you about the addicts, the fact is that when we're being paid by someone else, we are essentially giving them the opportunity to be the ones who decide what we're worth. We become dependent on them, and then we ask them, please, a little more gruel, if you don't mind. And I think that the first solution to the problem is pull the needle out of your own arm. It may be that by example, maybe your patients will pull the needle out of their arm as well. But until we act as the example, as the leaders that they want, it's going to be difficult for anyone to say, well, you doctors are not practicing what you preach.
Yeah, I've often described the situation as a wife that's battered at points, constantly battered, going to the emergency department, having problems in public, things like that, all kinds of bad things happening. Now, the advice that you, as a person or a friend or even a doctor would give is leave the batterer. You have to leave that abusive relationship. And then the person always says, but they love me. They love me. They help me. And they this and they that. And they're temporarily totally blind to all the abuse that goes on. And the only person in that relationship that can and will change it is the person who's being abused. They can say, stop. No more abuse now. That's it. I'm done. And they've got to hit rock bottom. And apparently physicians have to hit rock bottom as well.
Well, what's really interesting is I hear people frequently, when I tell them, I say, you just need to get out of all these insurance contracts. Oh, you can do that. It's fine for you. Your practice is different. I'm in this other situation. I don't have that option. Let me tell you what, a general surgeon depends almost exclusively on referrals. Those referrals come from doctors who are now totally involved in the system. So my referrals dropped off the map because I wasn't participating in the managed care contracts, and the docs who they themselves I had taken care of their families for years. I dropped off the insurance contracts. Suddenly, crickets. Nobody comes.
Wow.
Except them. They came back. They sent their families back.
Sure.
And, of course, they wanted it pretty much under the insurance contract basis. We have a system that is totally messed up, and as a referral-based doctor, it's pretty difficult. I'll just be very honest.
Sure. As well as a primary care physician or as a family physician, I have the same issue where patients say, well, I'd love to come see you, Dr. Wax, but if you can't refer me to a surgeon that's in network, then there's a problem. Dr. Thompson, you've been waiting patiently for a question?
Dr. Sewell, thank you for an excellent presentation and leading the way for us. I, too, am a general surgeon. I'm not taking the leap. I'm progressively moving toward a cash pay practice. I have questions about being an out-of-network provider. Certainly, we don't have to do verifications anymore.
Yeah, you do. I still, my office staff still works with insurance companies, and they still have to get pre-authorizations for hospital admission and so forth, because otherwise the hospital doesn't get paid. But it's also important too to understand that bigger ticket items, a surgical procedure, it costs several $1,000s. Most people they're not going to just come in and write you a check for that.
Right.
They want you to file their insurance, which we do. We just explain to them that I work for you. Your insurance company is not my employer. I will help you in any way I can. And in fact, if you have out-of-network benefits, we know that it's going to pay X amount. And so we are only going to hold you responsible for whatever our fee is, less what the insurance company is likely to pay. And it's surprising sometimes, especially in emergency situations, the insurance company pays us full fee.
So does your office submit a claim?
Yes.
Okay. And then the patient agrees to pay the balance?
Actually, most of the time I ask the patient to pay in advance.
Okay. I understand. But you still have to do pre-authorizations and verifications? Okay.
Yeah.
That was my question. Thank you.
And it's so from that standpoint, you might think, well, we're not totally insurance free. But here's the big difference. If the patient comes in and the bill is, say, $2,000 for a surgical procedure, and we know the insurance company is going to pay $1,200 or $800 or whatever it is, I have the flexibility of negotiating with my patient on that balance, either writing it off entirely if I just choose to do so. But if I'm in a contract that's called insurance fraud.
Right.
I can't do that.
Well, Medicare has that issue. Anybody who gives a discount or charity to a Medicare patient has committed fraud.
Correct. And so that's why that was one of the reasons why I got out of the Medicare contract. And all of our Medicare patients, they still come, and we have them sign the little disclaimer that says they understand they can't file on Medicare. But
are you completely out of that?
Yes.
Or are you?
I'm completely out.
Because there's 3 different designations that you can be with Medicare.
Well, and if you're a non-PAR practitioner, you still are under all the same rules and regulations for Medicare. It's just a matter of you can bill a little bit more, and the patient gets. But it's so confusing to the patients. I think you'd have to tell them I'm out or I'm still a Medicare provider.
Right.
That's my recommendation. Non-PAR, not.
And if anybody has interest as a physician in opting out of Medicare, potentially to opt out of all the issues, there's aapsonline.org, which is the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons out of Arizona, Phoenix area. They've got lots of resources there, and they're always looking for new physician members. And I hear tell, if you mention Dr. Craig Wax, you get your first year free. Okay? So I've got their clearance to do that. Question?
Yeah. You're in a procedure-intensive field, as am I, as a gastroenterologist. When you opt out, you, of course, can control your professional fees. How are you controlling the other, or are you controlling the other components of the cost to the patient?
Okay, that's a great question. And it's very misunderstood by almost everyone. Currently, if I have a Medicare patient, for instance, my anesthesiologist is a Medicare provider. The hospital is a Medicare provider. The lab's all a Medicare provider. Currently, I can order procedures or order tests or admit the patient, and all of those other people are handled in exactly the same fashion as if I were a Medicare provider. Now,
If I may interject, the current legislation is trying to deny physicians who don't have all of the numbers and the participations any sort of ability to order tests on their own patients.
That's correct. And that's something that we as a group should be pushing back against. We shouldn't be penalizing the patient because they choose to go to an opted out physician and then need other types of care that would be covered under the Medicare. This is the politics side, and we need to be lobbying long and hard against those kinds of regulations and obviously part of that whole group of faceless immortals, if you will, that we're fighting against is the vast bureaucratic network of people that are laying out these regulations and are interpreting and making law out of whole cloth based on the fact that no one is speaking up otherwise.
To flesh my question out further, I'm all about price transparency. I think it's ridiculous that we can't offer that 100%. When you're doing a procedure in a facility that's not like Surgery Center of Oklahoma, where you don't have every component under your aegis, how do you envision?
Can you bargain with the surgery centers and the other providers?
Yes and yes.
So a patient is asking you, how much does it cost for a colonoscopy? And you don't have all control of all components of that.
Right.
We actually spend a lot of time in our office, my office manager's on the phone with the hospital, getting the exact costs for a patient if it's not covered by insurance, or what their percentage was going to be if it is covered by insurance. We try and be the patient's advocate in that process so that no one agrees to doing anything until they understand what the cost to them is going to be. This ticket shock, the sticker shock that people are going through. Someone earlier said $37,000 for an overnight stay in the hospital for bronchitis. That has to go away, and we need to lead the way. You're exactly correct.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and thank you again for your presentation and your answering. Dr. Bob from Southlake, thank you very much. Always a pleasure to share the dais with you. Thank you.